we can fine-tune like our nutrients.
Almost hidden away in a San Carlos warehouse, robots are growing and harvesting food. It's a potential revolution in agriculture happening under the lights and in near silence.
You're at Ironox. This is the world's first production robotic farm.
CEO Brandon Alexander was born and bred on old-school family farms in Texas and Oklahoma, but his love for robotics pushed him to develop methods for machines to do the tedious jobs like seeding, transplanting, and harvesting. And he says robots could help solve a growing farm labor crisis.
Our goal is to use technology like robotics and machine learning to be able to grow produce at better quality, more consistently, and cheaper.
Several companies around the world are venturing into autonomous agriculture, but Ironox says its technology and methods set it apart. A robotic arm is outfitted with stereoscopic cameras that allow it to see in 3D and gently work around the tender leaves and stems of young plants. The plants are all contained in hydroponic pods, so they are grown in water, not soil, and that's where this comes in. You're riding aboard a machine that may be the John Deere of the future. They call it Angus, and it does all the heavy lifting. It rolls on special wheels that rotate forward and backward and side to side.
We have beautiful, very fragrant basil, butterhead.
The company is first focusing on salad greens, all grown in the warehouse, and it's packaging produce and testing with local chefs.
While we're focusing on restaurants initially, we do expect to expand to grocery stores in 2019.
Although California has easy access to the freshest greens, many parts of the world do not. Ironox says with its automated methods, it can produce a delicious salad bowl anywhere. In San Carlos, Len Ramirez, KPIX5.
Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh is beginning his first full day as a member of the United States Supreme Court. Rita Braver looks back on the long and acrimonious road to his confirmation.
Brett Kavanaugh left home late yesterday afternoon to be sworn in at a private ceremony at the Supreme Court, just hours after the Senate confirmed his appointment.
Sergeant at Arms will restore order in the gallery.
With Vice President Mike Pence presiding and frequent outbursts by Kavanaugh opponents in the gallery,
the Sergeant at Arms will restore order.
The vote was a close 50-48.
The nomination of Brett M. Kavanaugh of Maryland to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States is confirmed.
You're illegally blocking it.
As demonstrations raged outside the Supreme Court,
you will be arrested.
It was a climax to one of the nastiest nomination fights in American history.
Judge Brett Kavanaugh.
Because this wasn't just any nomination. It was to fill the seat held by Anthony Kennedy, known as a swing justice, and Kavanaugh's vote could tilt the court to the right because he's expected to side consistently with the court's 4 conservatives. So Kavanaugh's role in Ken Starr's investigation of Bill Clinton, his White House work for President George W. Bush, and his conservative record on the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington made him suspect to Democrats, who worried about everything from whether he would help overturn the Roe v. Wade abortion rights decision to whether he would allow President Trump to sidestep the special counsel investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election.
You can't give me an answer on whether a president has to respond to a subpoena from a court of law?
You're asking me to give my view on a potential hypothetical.
And then came that last-minute bombshell, Christine Blasey Ford's allegation that Kavanaugh had sexually assaulted her in high school.
Brett groped me and tried to take off my clothes. I believed he was going to rape me.
Followed by Kavanaugh's passionate denial.
I'm here today to tell the truth. I've never sexually assaulted anyone.
And an angry defense which raised concerns to some about his judicial temperament.
This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election.
In the days that followed, we saw victims of abuse going after Arizona Senator Jeff Flake in an elevator.
Don't look away from me. Look at me and tell me that it doesn't matter what happened to me. had one beer.
And the president mocking
You think it was,
Ford.
nope. How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know.
Then on Friday, Senator Susan Collins, a Republican from Maine, who Democrats thought might derail the Kavanaugh train, said she would vote for him.
But certain fundamental legal principles about due process, the presumption of innocence, and fairness do bear on my thinking, and I cannot abandon them.
The Kavanaugh battle has already become a flashpoint for both sides in next month's congressional elections. Just before yesterday's vote, Democratic leader Chuck Schumer was sounding the call.
If you believe the process here in the Senate was a sham, and you believe Americans deserve better, vote.
President Donald While in Topeka, Kansas last night, President Trump rallied his supporters.
You don't hand matches to an arsonist, and you don't give power to an angry left-wing mob, and that's what they've become.
As for Justice Kavanaugh, he's expected to be on the bench Tuesday.
Dana Perino, host of the Daily Briefing here on Fox News. She joins us from New York. All right, Dana, listen, you have more personal connection and networking with the Kavanaughs than most of us do, having worked in Bush 43 White House. How do you think their family must feel after what they've been through to get to this day?
I was thinking about that, possibly completely shattered in terms of exhaustion, relieved, possibly a little euphoria as well. And also maybe quite reflective. I think that one of the things you saw from Brett Kavanaugh when he testified is he talked about his faith. He has a strong faith in the Lord, and that he was relying on that faith in order to help get him through. He also reveres the Constitution, loves the Constitution and the law. And maybe after tonight, I think he's probably already thinking ahead to the cases that will come before the Supreme Court, the major issues that this country has to grapple with when it comes to liberty, when it comes to privacy, all the challenges that the country are facing. I hope that he and his wife and daughters and family can take a moment to celebrate. They have been through a lot. The country has been through a lot. And I think when he wrote the op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that some people love, some people criticize, I think he was trying to signal that the judge that he was for 12 years, where you have the record of over 300 opinions, that is the kind of judge he will be on the Supreme Court. So I think, Shannon, that's probably what is on his mind right now, and possibly also a lot of gratitude for the president who first hired him in the Bush 43 White House and put him on the circuit court, but then the president who stuck by him and nominated him and stuck by him, and that is President Trump, who goes now tonight to Kansas for a rally with a significant campaign promise kept, and also just a unified Republican Party, unlike we have seen in possibly 10 years.
Dana, I want to ask you on a kind of personal level about Brett Kavanaugh, because you did work with him in the Bush 43 White House. And for those of us who've been following him in public on TV, there really have been three Brett Kavanaughs we've seen. First of all, the legal scholar, immensely comfortable discussing judicial decisions, rulings, precedents in his original Judiciary Committee briefing. Then the interview with our colleague Martha MacCallum, where he seemed very constrained, very uncomfortable, understandably so, dealing with the charges, and then the kind of Kavanaugh unplugged that we saw in his second Judiciary Committee testimony, when he was very fiery and really took on the Democrats in a very contentious way. Your view, which is the real Brett Kavanaugh?
Well, I think, look, he's a total human, right? He's the full spectrum. He's exceedingly gracious, also an exceeding intellectual. I'll remember one thing, Chris. In 2005, I was a spokesperson for John Roberts. He had just been nominated to replace Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who, if you'll remember, she resigned, and it was quite a surprise to everyone. But President George W. Bush had a list of possible nominees. John Roberts was the choice, and I remember as a press officer, I was getting so many questions, so many legal questions I couldn't answer. I'll never forget, it was a Friday night about 7:30 p.m., If you've ever waited tables, I felt like I was in the weeds. That means you're just out of control. You have too many requests. You don't know what to do with them. About 7:30 at night on a summer evening, and I went downstairs to the staff secretary's office, and he was still there, as usual. And I knocked on the door, and I said, "I'm sorry to bother you, Brett, but I need some help." And he sat with me for about an hour and 30 minutes and explained to me all of these different cases I was being asked about, one of them being Roe v. Wade and the right to privacy and that connection there, and explaining how this had happened in the Supreme Court over a long period of time. And then you could go out with him at night and have a good time and a laugh. I never saw any bad behavior by Brett Kavanaugh, only an exceedingly gracious person.
We're doing a hell of a job of doing it. We're draining the swamp, and we want to defeat the Democrats conclusively. Under Republican leadership, America is booming. America is thriving. America is winning because we are finally putting America first. We are putting America first. Yesterday it was announced that unemployment has fallen to 3.7%, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, lowest in 50 years. We've created nearly 600,000 jobs in the last 3 months alone. Think of that, 600,000. And if I ever said that when I was campaigning, the fake news media would go and say, impossible. They are fake. Manufacturing confidence is at an all-time high. Confidence, very important, all-time high. And we have the best economy in the history of our country, the best. We're taking care of our veterans, protecting our great seniors, and rebuilding America's military might like it hasn't been built before. But if Democrats take control, they will try to plunge our country into gridlock, poverty, and chaos, and that's what's going to happen. It can change. The Democrats want to significantly raise your taxes. Essentially, they want to impose socialism, Venezuela. Dismantle law enforcement and eliminate our borders. They want to have nice, open borders. No way. The Democrats have become the party of crime. They have become the party of crime. Think of it. Republicans are the party of law and order and justice. To everyone in this room tonight, that's a lot of people, to every citizen watching across our land, this is your time to choose. It's a time to choose whether we turn backward to the failure and frustration of the past, or whether we continue forward into a future of American greatness. It's not up to the media. It's not up to the pundits. It's up to you to decide your fate. And remember this, what happened in 2016 and what's happening even more so now, I believe, because I produced, and people see I produced. One of them said he made a lot of promises, and he actually produced more than he made promises. I mean, I did. You have the power with your vote to defend your your community, your country, and everything we hold sacred and righteous and true. Loyal citizens like you help build this country, and together we are taking back our country, returning power to everyday great American patriots. The state of Kansas was settled by tough pioneer men and strong women who defied danger and braved the wilderness to build a beautiful life on the plains. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Strong women, strong women. Strong. I'm sorry, fellas. Stronger than the men. I'm sorry, fellas. Strong. They didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have a lot of luxury. But they all had one thing in common. They loved their families. They loved their country. And they loved their God. These courageous patriots did not shed their blood, sweat, and tears so that we could sit at home while others tried to erase their legacy and destroy our proud and great American heritage. For the sake of our freedom and for the sake of our children, we are going to work, we are going to fight, and we are going to win, win, win. We will not bend. We will not break. We will never give in. We will never give up. We will never back down. We will never surrender. And we will always fight on to victory. Because we are American and our hearts bleed red, white, and blue. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. And together, we will make America wealthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. Thank you, Kansas. Thank you.
Well, and you know, Dan Bongino, last week you had quite an energized panel discussion with Chris Hahn talking about how horrible Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, was treated. This week was an incredible week in terms of the turnaround with the president in Mississippi and how he then kind of changed the conversation back to Christine Ford. What would you say to Chris Hahn, who isn't here tonight?
You know, I was disappointed in Chris last week because he's a personal friend of mine, but he did something last week that disgusted me. He attacked and he jumped on this liberal train to destroy this good man, Brett Kavanaugh, a patriot. And a really good man, Judge. I was deeply offended by that. But today, this is a vindication. And Chris, you know what? You know what I got to say? How you like them apples? That's what I got to say. Reminds me of that scene in Good Will Hunting when he knocks, so you like apples? How you like them apples? This was a vindication, Judge. A vindication of, one more point on this, a vindication of Trumpism, and Matt knows it too. Listen, for too long we've been in a boxing match, a political boxing match with the left wearing brass knuckles, and we're appealing to the ref, the media. Please tell him to take the brass knuckles off. Trump took the gloves off. He's fought back. We got tax cuts, economic growth, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh. Trumpism's been vindicated. Take a victory lap tonight.
It's unbelievable. In fact, all my viewers, the president is going to be calling in the next few minutes. I'm sure after he gets out of the arena there in Topeka, Kansas, we'll be able to talk to him. On, I think, one of the most exciting days of his presidency. I mean, who could have predicted that this would actually happen, Matt? I mean, it was Brett Kavanaugh went from this great circuit court judge to a guy involved in gang rapes, a sexual predator. I mean, it was, I think, some of the darkest days they had to be of Brett Kavanaugh's life. And now he's back up and just sworn in as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court.
And it shows you how our politics has changed, because the only reason that happened is that Brett Kavanaugh went to that hearing in the Senate and connected with the American people and honestly and aggressively pushed back on these scurrilous charges. It was that moment that sealed his fate so that he would actually be confirmed in the Senate. And I think there were people across this country who were so enthralled, I think maybe even people in the White House there as well, by the sheer honesty and the emotion of all this, because every American felt the pain of this. They know what it's like when someone gets railroaded, and he was the personification of great injustice.
You know, it wasn't just being railroaded, Matt, and I'll go to you, Dan. It was about eliminating the presumption of innocence. Right. It was about a mob rule dictating that all women should be believed and men should just shut up. My fear was that Lady Justice was not only, you know, having the bandage ripped off and told which way to go, but that she was being thrown out of the game totally. And that was frightening, I think, to a lot of Americans who believe in the system, believe in the presumption of innocence. And I think it may have brought out people who would never have really cared about a Supreme Court nomination.
Right, but Judge, the reason we won here is important. What you just said is absolutely accurate. The left has done this before. They lob a grenade onto the political battlefield, and that grenade ends in ist. Racist, misogynist. In this case, it was rapist, which was disgusting. Wow. And in the past, a lesser president, Judge, would have backed away immediately and said, hey, Judge, for the better of the country, step aside. Trump said, no, not today. And Matt hit the nail on the head. When Brett Kavanaugh got up there and said, not today, not on my watch. I may not sit on the Supreme Court, but you're not going to crap on my reputation and decades of good work for this country and my family. Matt is absolutely right.
The Trump administration unveiled its new strategy, which it says will finally win the 17-year-old war on terror. RT's correspondent Dan Cohen takes a look.
National Security Advisor John Bolton announced what he called the America First national strategy for counterterrorism on Thursday. It focuses on the Islamic Republic of Iran, ISIS, and al-Qaeda.
The proliferation of ISIS and al-Qaeda networks and their propaganda requires a new approach to address the threat to the United States from radical Islamist terrorists. In addition, the United States faces terrorist threats from Iran, which remains the most prominent state sponsor of terrorism, really the world's central banker of international terrorism since 1979.
The strategy calls ISIS the foremost radical Islamist terror group and notes that al-Qaeda leaders are working to consolidate and expand the group's presence in several regions, including in Syria. That's likely a reference to Idlib province in northern Syria, what U.S. envoy to the anti-ISIS coalition Brett McGurk called the largest al-Qaeda safe haven since 9/11. While a Syrian and Russian military operation to liberate Idlib from its al-Qaeda rulers is on hold thanks to an agreement between Russia and Turkey, President Trump credited himself for preventing the operation after reading a report in the New York Times.
It said that they were being surrounded and they were going in and starting literally the next day they were going to drop bombs all over the place and perhaps kill millions of people in order to get 35,000 terrorists. And I put out on social media and elsewhere, I gave Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, everybody these orders. Don't let it happen.
Contradictions aside, Bolton warned this isn't the Obama administration, and while there aren't many differences between their respective counterterrorism strategies, one is in their approaches to the detention camp at Guantanamo Bay. President Obama promised to close Guantanamo, though ultimately he did not. And the Trump strategy calls to, quote, preserve our ability to detain terrorists and explore ways to better integrate and maximize the utility of this capability. Whether the Trump administration can deliver on its pledge to defeat terrorism while preventing other countries from doing so remains to be seen. In Washington, Dan Cohen, RT.
For more, we go to former Pentagon official Michael Maloof. Thanks for joining us, Michael. Sure. Bolton stressed that the new anti-terrorism strategy will be different from the Obama administration's. What does that mean?
Well, I think it means that there'll be more intolerance of Iran than the Obama administration showed. Clearly, what this is just a veiled effort to go after Iran. You'll notice that what was absent was pretty much any mention of jihadi Salafists supported by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, but you heard a lot about Hamas and Hezbollah supported by Iran. The problem with that is that his goal is to lump everybody into one basket. The Hezbollah and Hamas are known as resistance groups. They're totally different than Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS, which chop off heads, blow up civilians anywhere. You don't see that. It wasn't Shia, which are Hezbollah, that has been catering to going around the world, setting up caliphates and launching attacks. But they're still supported by Saudi Arabia and UAE today, namely the jihadi Salafists.
Well, we have not seen any major terrorist attacks in the United States under the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that will continue on. However, under what scenario do you think the U.S. would consider going to a full-scale war in Iran?
I think if Israel goads them into it, I think that nothing that has to do with Iran policy today is done without looking through the prism of Israel.
The first session of the Youth Synod began in the Synod Hall. The very first step when all gathered inside was praying for God to guide these 3 weeks of assembly. Cardinal Sacco, Chaldean Patriarch, spoke on behalf of the Synod Fathers and expressed his support for the Pope.
Noi siamo sicuri che le tempeste, per quanto siano forti, passeranno e la Chiesa uscirà più pura e più forte. Questo sinodo è davvero una grazia e una benedizione per la Chiesa nel mondo di oggi.
Pope Francis explained the Synod should be a time for sharing and, above all, for listening. He regretted that on too many occasions the voice of young people has not been taken into account.
Il cammino di preparazione a questo momento ha evidenziato una Chiesa in debito di ascolto, anche nei confronti dei giovani, che spesso dalla Chiesa si sentono non compressi nella loro originalità e quindi non accolti per quello che sono veramente e talvolta persino respinti.
He invited the elders to take the young seriously and also for the young not to believe they know everything. This is why he called for dialogue to be established without falling into the temptation of prejudices and stereotypes.
Una Chiesa che non ascolta si mostra chiusa alla novità, chiusa alle sorprese di Dio e non potrà risultare credibile, in particolare per i giovani, che inevitabilmente si allontaneranno anziché avvicinarsi.
In his speech, the Pope also spoke of clericalism. He asked for none of the participants at the Synod to believe their vocation implies power rather than service. The Shroud of Turin is a centuries-old piece of cloth believed to have been used to wrap Christ's body when placed in the tomb. According to tradition, the cloth contains the imprint of Jesus. After studying and constructing a statue of the man from the shroud, sculptor Sergio Rodella wrapped a copy of the cloth around the model to see if it accurately matches in its depiction of the man. Ivan Marsura, director of the Museum of Popes, says many other models hypothesizing the possible man from the shroud have been more artistic than scientific. According to Ivan, this new statue supports centuries of studies and also may help to understand if the shroud is a fake or a real relic.
questa statua posso dire che
I can say for the first time everything practically matches between the Shroud of Turin and this statue.
The construction of this statue has even helped historians obtain new information about the man from the Shroud of Turin.
l'uomo della Sindona aveva una semi-paralysis.
The man of the shroud had semi-paralysis. The hole for the nails is not on the pulse but on the hands.
This statue was constructed after more than 2 years of anatomical studies. 3 times Rodello was forced to demolish his model and rework it. This was to ensure the most accurate representation of the man from the shroud. Sergio first constructed an iron skeleton model and used virtual reconstruction with computer-aided design. He even used negative photos of the shroud, mathematical grids, and transparent paper to more precisely identify the wounds and scourges this man suffered. They hope to produce replicas of the original statue in 4 different materials: plaster, marble, bronze, and wood, to distribute to churches around the globe. The exhibition was recently on tour in Rome, and Sergio plans to take it around the world. It also includes original photographs of the Shroud of Turin, as well as relics of Christ's cross, blood, crown of thorns, a piece from the shroud, and other artifacts.